Ever had one of those projects, where it starts as this awesome idea, but then, bam, deadlines are suddenly a problem, budget's out the window, and honestly, you're not even sure what you're building anymore.
Yeah, we've all been there. It's like way more common than you'd think.
Which is like the perfect reason why we're doing this deep dive, right? We're tackling this source, PR08 Plan and Manage Scope. But honestly, it's a little dense,
A little.
Okay, maybe more than a little, but the good news is you've got me, and we've got expert speaker here to break it down.
Think of this as your cheat sheet for project success. No more scope creep nightmares.
Love it. So where do we even begin? If we want to dodge that whole scope creep monster, where do we start?
You absolutely have to, nail down the why and the what, before you even start thinking about the how.
Okay, that makes sense. But what does that look like in the actual doing of a project?
So you got to figure out the what. Like, what are the actual requirements? Wait, the stuff your project absolutely needs to have. Otherwise, what are you even doing right?
It's like, what are we even building here?
Exactly. And this source, PR08, it emphasizes how those requirements, they're not just about brainstorming. It's about, like, looking back at what you already know.
Wait, so you're saying, like, old business plans, tech specs from who knows when, those random conversations that somebody probably documented, those are actually useful.
100%. They've got info gold in there.
So it's like we're project archaeologists. I like it.
Exactly. But then you got to prioritize.
This is where it gets interesting, right? Separating those must-haves from the nice-to-haves.
You got it. The source, it mentions Moscow.
Yeah.
And there's also Kano analysis for figuring out your priorities.
Those sound a little,
Jargony.
Yeah, a little. So how about an example?
Okay, picture this. You're building an app, right? So with Moscow, you'd say something like, all right, a secure login, that's a must-have. But social media integration, that's important, but it's more of a should-have. It's not a deal breaker.
And then there's that, like, really cool feature that everyone's kind of hyped about, but...
The personalized dashboard.
Yes, that thing. So that falls into, like, the could-have category.
Totally. Future consideration.
Yeah.
And then, you were talking about those advanced analytics. The ones you were excited about.
Yeah.
Those might be a won't-have.
Yeah.
At least for now, while you're getting the core stuff done.
This is already making me feel more organized. Just hearing this, I can see how this is super valuable because without prioritizing, things get messy fast.
It's easy to get lost in all the possibilities,
Right.
and then your project just becomes this big blob of, well, everything.
Yeah.
And then nothing gets done well.
And nobody wants that. You end up with a project that's like 5 years late and 3 times over budget.
Exactly. Prioritizing is about, being smart with your resources, making sure every bit of effort really counts. It's got to drive impact. Think of it like a business.
Yeah.
A good business doesn't just throw money at every single idea that comes along.
Right. They've got to like invest in the stuff that's actually going to give them a return.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Same principle here.
Okay, so let's say we've got our list, right? All our must-haves, should-haves. We're feeling pretty organized, but even then, it's still this big project looming over us. How do we make it less, daunting?
You got to break it down. It's like that saying, how do you eat an elephant?
Oh, I know this one. One bite at a time.
There you go.
So no swallowing the project whole. Got it.
Exactly. And our source, it actually talks about this, creating a roadmap. They call it the work breakdown structure.
The what now?
Work breakdown structure, or WBS.
WBS. Okay. I'm sure that makes sense to like project management people. But can we get a like real world example here?
Sure. Remember that app we were talking about?
Yeah.
So instead of having this one giant task, build the app,
Yeah.
you break it down into smaller chunks, right? Like you'd have your design phase, then development, then you got to test it, and then finally you get to the launch.
Okay, just hearing it broken down like that already makes me feel a little calmer.
Right?
But even then, like, let's take that design phase, right? That's still a lot of stuff.
Of course. And you'd break that down even further. You'd have like your UI UX design, creating the wireframes, getting feedback from everyone, all that good stuff.
So it's like you're creating these smaller and smaller tasks until you get to something totally manageable.
Exactly. And those like super granular tasks, those are your work packages. That's what the source calls them. And that's what you can actually assign to people to get done.
Makes sense. Okay, now there's also this thing called a product backlog that keeps popping up in the source. It sounds kind of similar, but...
It's related for sure.
Yeah.
The source mentions Agile and Scrum. Those project management methodologies?
Yeah, vaguely.
So the product backlog, it's a big deal in those worlds.
Okay, so for those of us who don't speak Agile, what is this product backlog thing?
It's a list.
Yeah.
Like your prioritized list, but it's not set in stone. It's constantly changing and evolving as you go.
Oh, so it's not like a rigid, this is the plan, stick to it no matter what kind of thing.
Right. You got to be flexible, especially in those agile environments.
Yep.
You get new information, things change, the market might even shift on you.
Yikes.
Exactly. But you still need some kind of structure, right? So you've got your product backlog that you keep updating. And inside that backlog, you've got these things called user stories.
User stories. Okay, finally something that sounds interesting. Tell me more.
So a user story, it's basically just a way to describe a feature, but from the perspective of the person who's actually going to be using it.
Oh, that's smart. So instead of it just being like implement login function, it's more like,
It'd be more like, as a user, I want to be able to log in quickly and easily so I can, do the thing I came here to do.
right. It's about the why, not just the what.
Exactly. It keeps everyone focused on the actual goal, which is delivering value to the user.
I like it. Okay, but even with the best backlog in the world or the most amazing WBS breakdown, things can still go off the rails, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Planning is only half the battle.
Which is why we need to talk about how to actually stay on track and how to fight back when scope creep rears its ugly head.
Now we're talking.
Yeah.
And lucky for us, our source, PR08, has some really good advice on how to do just that.
It's like, imagine you're about to head out on this amazing road trip. You've got your route all planned, snacks are packed, you've even made the perfect playlist. But then...
You hit a detour.
Exactly.
That
Or
turn.
like that one friend, you know, the one, decides, hey, we have to check out this weird roadside attraction, the one that's like not even on the map.
And all of a sudden, that perfectly planned road trip, it's not so perfect anymore.
Chaos. Complete project chaos. So how do we avoid those detours? You know, this scope creep black holes that can totally derail a project.
Our trusty guide, it actually talks about this. PR08, monitoring and validating. That's the key.
Okay, break that down for me. Monitoring, what does that even mean in like project world?
So think of it like you're regularly checking your project GPS, right? You're making sure you're still on track. Like, are you actually hitting those milestones? Are you sticking to the plan? All that good stuff.
So you're comparing where you are to that roadmap we were talking about, the WBS or, the product backlog, if that's our jam.
Exactly. The guide actually calls this your scope baseline. Basically, it's like, this is what we said we were going to do, and this is how we're going to measure if we're actually doing it.
Love a good baseline.
Right. Keeps you honest.
But let's be real. Sometimes things change, like actually change. New information pops up, priorities shift. Maybe the entire world decides to throw a pandemic at us, Tuesday. So how do you roll with those punches without your whole project imploding?
Well, that's where scope creep control comes in.
Scope creep control. It sounds kind of epic, like we're battling a dragon or something.
A little bit. It's about having a system, right? So PRA8, it talks about having this thing, a formal change control process.
Okay, that sounds a little intense. What does that actually look like in real life?
So say you get a request to add something to the project. Instead of just saying yes or no on the spot, you've got this process. You can evaluate it. You could be like, okay, does this even make sense with our goals? What's this going to do to the timeline, the budget? What about the team? Do they even have the bandwidth? You ask all the tough questions before you commit to anything.
It's like when you're at the grocery store with someone and they try to sneak something extra into the cart. It's not about saying no to everything. It's just, maybe we should think about this before we end up with like 5 boxes of those fancy cookies.
100%. It's about making smart choices, being intentional.
And I'm guessing communication is key here, right? Like keeping everyone in the loop, talking about potential scope creep before it becomes a thing.
Totally. The guide stresses this, how important it is to be talking to everyone, your stakeholders, your team, making sure everyone's on the same page.
Because it's always easier to adjust course, like slightly, than to have to completely overhaul your entire project halfway through.
Exactly. Okay, so we've navigated the detours. We've dodged those scope creep dragons. We're feeling good. What's next?
We celebrate, pop the champagne, we're done.
But hold on just a second. Our trusty source has one last nugget of wisdom for us, and it's a big one. Scope validation.
Right, because even with all the planning and the monitoring, we still got to make sure we actually built the thing we set out to build.
Exactly. You got to validate that what you've done actually matches those must-haves we talked about, like way back at the beginning.
So this is like our final quality check before we unleash this amazing project out into the world.
Exactly. It could be anything from like official sign-offs to really thorough testing, getting feedback from actual users, just making sure everything is good to go.
So there you have it. We did it. We took this dense source material, PR08 Plan and Manage Scope, and we broke it down. We talked about defining what really matters, getting organized with WBSs and backlogs, and then actually staying on track by monitoring and validating. It's like a whole project management journey.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, even if you're not like a project manager by trade, this stuff is valuable.
Right. These principles, they apply to so many things. It could be a work thing, obviously, but even planning, like a big event, or finally organizing that closet you've been avoiding.
It's about setting yourself up for success no matter what you're tackling.
Love it. All right, everyone, that's it for this deep dive. We hope you learned some good stuff. And hey, next time you're facing a daunting project, remember what we talked about. Define, break down, monitor, validate. Make scope your superpower. Until next time, stay curious.